inflation, if you will, in the pricing of bonds because there's so much capital out there trying to find a home. So there's your inflation. I mean, yeah, it sucks when you go to the grocery store and stuff costs more, or gasoline costs more, or you're paying somebody more to cut your lawn or do work or whatever. Yeah, that's one form of inflation. But the one form of inflation they'll never tell you about or talk about is inflation in asset pricing. They call that a bull market. That's good inflation. But again, it's inflation nonetheless.
Well, not so good for someone who's facing the inflation, which boosts GDP when they jack up college tuition rates. Then kids end up with a mortgage now. And if they're trying to buy a house or start a family one day, then all of a sudden that gift of home price and real estate inflation is less enjoyable. Bill, I pulled up here's the Fed's preferred measure of inflation, the PCE bullshit. Here is the core still, what have we got? 2.8% last month. Beat the expectation. Even Wall Street couldn't calculate it that high. Then here, non-core at 2.6%. Again, scoring higher than even the finest Wall Street economists expected. Bill, I'm curious, has the Trump team reached out to you, perhaps as a possible Fed chairman? I mean, we were talking before we started that you promised me you're going to be Ben Bernanke for Halloween this year. I mean, you've got the haircut already and the mustache and.
I'll be Bernanke for Halloween, but there's
Okay.
not a chance in hell that I'd ever take the Federal Reserve or any type of job like that because it's fraudulent.
Well, I guess that's fine. Start growing the beard, and we'll have you back here on the 31st. And a little disappointed to hear you're not going to throw your hat in the ring because basically, so far, the leading candidate is this man who explained what.
Which means they need the rate hike and a rate cut. They need a rate hike and a rate cut.
So, as only our friend Jim can lay out. But I mean, it's essentially that's the monetary policy that I think Powell is getting at.
Well, I think that's pretty close to correct. I mean, they need a rate cut to try to save the system from imploding upon itself, but they need a rate hike in order to support the dollar. I mean, the dollar is going to be the sacrificial lamb in all of this.
Well, not to mention that the Trump administration and basically everyone outside of the basketballs I heard have not talked about the overvalued dollar yet, but all of the living people have. And I've had some smart folks on here in the past month or so. I'll send you this one by this guy, Michael McNair. I think you'd find intriguing his thesis of how they've already been influencing the dollar lower, which I think there's no Pharetic consensus yet, but a growing school of thought that one way or another, they're going to get it lower because they really have no other choice. Although, Bill, obviously we hear a lot about monetization, and we'll get to that. Although the big news yesterday, I know you had some thoughts on this. Silver getting added to the U.S. critical minerals draft list. It is not final yet, but we did have that news come out. Looks like they have about 30 days, 30-day period before this would become policy. And any thoughts you had on that?
Uh, it's, I mean, becoming a listed critical mineral, it seems to me like somebody's waking up in Washington to understand that, you can't create supply by creating paper contracts. They understand, you got to dig for minerals, you got to drill for oil. I mean, it's a physical anomaly, if you will. I mean, it's not something that they can create with paper. It's good that somebody in Washington is realizing that. I mean, they did that with other rare earth minerals. I mean, there's all kinds of things that the United States needs to really get to work on and should have been on to work on 5, 10 years ago. with the way that our supply chains are. I mean, we rely on enemies for uh, for things that we need to make war, and that's a ridiculous supply chain.
It doesn't seem ideal. And right, even before you said it, Bill, I was pulling this up. There's MP Metals, and here unveiled a multi-billion-dollar deal with the U.S. government to boost output of rare metals. And I remember back when this happened a couple of weeks ago, I noticed materials used to build weapons, electric vehicles, and many electronics. And I'm thinking, gee, I know another metal that sounds like, obviously in silver. And Bill, as I was pulling this one up, here's a few other interesting headlines. Trump weighs using $2 billion in CHIPS Act funding for critical minerals. So again,
No
this
matter what,
is
no matter what, Chris, this is bullish if you're a miner.
that's what I was just gonna get at, where I mean we're seeing similar language being used that could apply, and rare earth prices hit two-year peak after MP Materials stops China shipments. But yes, anything else you could add on what you think could be an impact? Would seem to have to be good news on some level for the miners.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have an administration that's friendly to an industry, it makes working or competing in that industry easier because you've got a government that favors it and is cutting as much red tape as possible. And that is one thing about Trump as a businessman is he understands. Uh, you don't look at the price of something because the price can be painted, can be manipulated, can be altered using leverage, using derivatives. But getting it out of the ground, he understands the permitting process, if you will, with all the buildings that he's put up. So I think he understands that uh, the permitting process is huge. Uh, One thing he's certainly not followed up on. Look what's going on in California. I mean, what is there? 5 houses now total that are under construction from the quote wildfires. I mean, talk about red tape. You
Yeah.
only got 5 houses out of thousands. What was it, 13, 14,000 houses? I forget what the number was, but you only have 5 of them that are able to rebuild already because of the red tape. And that's what they're doing, I think, with the mining industry is cutting the red tape, making it easier to get product or projects started and moving along.
Yeah, I would agree. I remember when Keith Neumeyer was on the show a year or two ago talking about how they had petitioned the Canadian government. And at one point I asked him, so if they say yes, what does that actually mean? And the main thing he was talking about was the permitting situation. Also, in terms of California, I've heard several of the mining folks say that if you could ever get through the red tape there to mine, that would still be some of the greatest land ever. Yet, like you pointed out, good luck with that. And also appreciate what you're saying about those changes in the governmental policy. I never quite understood that fully until I started reading Austrian economics, but it's similar like you give the tax break on the mortgage payments, and so that directs a lot of money over there. So this certainly encouraging step. Although, Bill, I did want to ask you, obviously you're quite in tune with the retail market. Premiums have stayed low, continue to hear of selling, but anything you could share there?
Yeah, the selling has somewhat continued. I think for the last month or 2 months, it's slowed down a little bit. But I mean, the first 6 months of the year, uh, eh, we handled more sales than I think I had in the previous 15 years combined. And when people want to sell, I generally ask them why. And you'll get someone who says, I'm buying a piece of land or I want to buy a business or something like that. But the vast majority are, I need the money to live on. I
Yeah.
think, people have spent down their other savings, and now they're eating into the bone just to survive.
Yeah, that is what I've heard from the dealers that continue to reach out and ask. I would have thought it would have been more people, who bought it in the teens decade and finally hits 30 and they want to get out ahead. Although I keep hearing what you were saying there. So, and what the premium levels are still pretty low right now as well, right?
Yeah, premiums across the board are pretty much the lowest you've seen in the last 15, 20 years.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And Bill, I guess we'll make this the last one. We had all this gold and silver flow from London to New York earlier this year on tariffs that never existed. I don't know that they were ever talking about actually placing a tariff on London in particular anyway. Now the metal's here. I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but any updated thoughts on there's some who speculate that perhaps the government was bringing some of the metals, but any, as you've learned more, or anything about what happened and what happens now that it's sitting here with, on the other hand, London inventories seemingly a little low. I guess some could go back, but anything on that one?
Um, I really don't know the answer to that. It's just my guess. Uh, they wanted, when I say they, I'm talking about the administration, the Trump administration wanted to onshore gold because I think it's their plan at some point to revalue gold. And it's obviously much better if you have it on your shore or in your control as opposed to overseas. Um, I view it as what they did was they onshored unencumbered collateral because there's so little collateral left anywhere in the world to borrow against. And if they're going to revalue gold, they want it onshore so that collateral gets revalued higher here.
Yeah.
When I say here, where they have control over it, where they can use it, whatever, where they can lend it, I mean, obviously once they revalue it higher, then all of a sudden you're going to get, gold as collateral to be borrowed against. So maybe that's their plan for the next inflate or die cycle.
Do you think there could be any connection to, we heard Fort Knox audit, and then they've gone awfully quiet on that since? I mean, obviously we're guessing here, but do you think Trump found an answer he wasn't expecting, or what? Anything you've heard on that?
That I've not heard anything, but that would be my guess is that he heard something he was not expecting. Don't do the audit because you won't like the results.
Well, I think obviously the solution here is that Trump should go on over to BillHolter.com, which is a fine website that explains all of these things. Bill, I know you said you're not down for Fed chairman, but I've heard some speculate that Bessent might move over to Fed chair. What about Treasury Secretary? You could take that one on?
Now, let me put it this way. I'm at a point in life where I can basically say and do what I'd like to say or do. I mean, you can't call my daddy. He's passed away many years ago. You can't call my boss because I don't have one. So I kind of like it the way it is, and I get to say or do or whatever what I please. And when I say what I please, I mean within reason, but I don't. The point being, I don't have to answer to somebody for what my views are.
Well, I like it. Sounds like maybe independent candidate, just become president, then you can shoot it. You do it like Bill would. Look at that handsome cowboy in there. Bill, could you just let people know what you have on the site? And I know you allow people to contact you as well, which is always nice. Anything you can mention there, my friend?
Yeah, you can go to BillHolter.com. There is a contact button. I post probably 3, 4, 5 articles per day, do some writing. There is a really good column. It's right in the center there, Grizzly's Corner.
I was just seeing that. That sounds like you.
Excellent resource for prepping. Uh, the guy who writes that uh, has been into the no man's land of Idaho for 6 months at a time, him and a pack of mules, and comes out smelling like a rose. In that on that particular that whole column that he's written, and I mean he's posted probably a dozen times or more. There are links to things that he has used uh, that he feels are valuable, good value, and the things that he's used are things that are necessities uh, for when the lights go out. So that's a really great resource. I mean, you can go back. I think he started writing a year and a half, 2 years ago. Um, but there's definitely some great information there.
Well, I see